Question 1. So I need to go to the board meeting minutes and I need to look for any concerns with regards to Companies Act King or SACA Code of Professional Conduct that are noted in the reading time. If I've got anything there, then I'm going to straight away put down the theory from the legislation or code or act, and then I'm going to apply the information. So trying to get maximum marks up front without having to go back and read those minutes again. So we go into the minutes of the meeting. So I come to those minutes and I can already see here, I've made notes. There's concerns with compliance with King, looking at the composition of the board as well as the chair of the board. I've also noted here CASA for Paul Pogger, so I have shown CPC is relevant. Also here for Lindiwe Messi, CPC is relevant. I come back down here and I can see I've got non-compliance with the Companies Act with regards to section 75, director's financial interest. This was the main concern I had noted here because he did not disclose his interest and he voted. And as a result of that, I've got a concern with this director's conduct from a Companies Act perspective, and then I've got my additional King concerns. Something that I haven't noted here already, but now having done my summary and once again gone and said who the two CASAs were, is my CPC now, because it's Paul Pogger who's got an interest and hasn't disclosed this. So from a CPC, we've got a conflict of interest. Okay, so our biggest concern here and where we're going to get the most marks is actually going to be proving the non-compliance with the Companies Act in terms of director's financial interest, because there's a bunch of requirements that need to be adhered to when this director has this interest and how they go about disclosing and acting in manners in accordance with the Companies Act. He has not done those, so I will then go and prove it to gain my marks. So let's go to the Companies Act, Section 75. Section 75, Director's Personal Financial Interest. It first talks about a director and anybody related. In this case, it is the actual director, so it's fine. And it says it's not if it's a decision that affects all directors. That is not the case. So what needs to happen? If a director has an interest, at any time, the director may disclose this financial interest in advance. But if the director has an interest of a matter that is going to be considered at the board, at a meeting of the board, which is this case, the director, first of all, must disclose the interest before the matter is being considered, must disclose any material information and any observations. If present, must leave, must not take part in the consideration. While absent is regarded as being present for the quorum, but not for the decision, and he may not execute any documentation. What I can see here is that he did not disclose, he did not leave, he did take part, and he has executed the documentation, so I've got non-compliance with the Companies Act. Okay, so I'm going to put down this theory first and then prove how he has not adhered to that. In terms of setting up my solution, I'm going to have 1, 1 here, and I'm going to have my headings, Companies Act. There's no idea of how things are going to be split or marks awarded, so I would leave a page or a bit for Companies Act, then have a page for King, and then have a page for the CPC. Okay, we're dealing with the Companies Act first of all, so I'm going to now discuss. Per the Companies Act, if a director has a personal financial interest in a matter to be discussed by the board, the director must disclose this prior to the meeting, must disclose any information he has, and may disclose observations, must leave the meeting, must not take part in the consideration, and must not execute any documentation with regards to that interest. Now I can say what's happened. So I can say Paul Pogger has an interest in household bottles because he is a director. He is also a director of Sani-time. Therefore, we have non-compliance with the Companies Act because he did not disclose his interest in household he did not provide any information on the matter. He did not leave the meeting. He voted on the contract with Bottles household. And he executed the contract with Household Bottles. So I've proved the non-compliance with the Companies Act here because he didn't meet those requirements. When a director is not acting in the best interest of the business but rather of his own personal interest, we have a concern with his conduct. Let me quickly go to Section 76. Section 76 of the Companies Act, Standard and Conduct. A director must not use his position of director to gain advantage for the director or to knowingly cause harm to the company. He must always act in good faith, in the best interest of the company, with a degree of care and skill and diligence. Okay, so I can now go and discuss how he has not acted in the best interest of the company, but rather he's used his position to gain advantage for himself. So I'm going to say, per the Companies Act, a director must act in the best interest of the company in good faith, with due care, and not use his position as a director for personal benefit. And then I'm going to say, Paul Pogger did not disclose his interest in household bottles in order to gain from the contract as a director of household, therefore is not acting in the best interest of the company. And guys, maybe by using household, he is actually acting in the best interest of the company, because he can actually secure great bottles for the best price. But the fact that he didn't disclose it shows that he's trying to hide something, and so that's not in the best interest of the company. Okay, he said he can get the best price because he's a good negotiator, when in fact it's not. It's because he's a director. All right, so it's that deceit that is the concern with his conduct. And then Section 77 of the Companies Act discusses how he could be held liable. Liability of directors. It says a company may be held, or director of a company may be held liable in accordance with the principles of common law relating to breach of his fiduciary duty if he breaches any of those, which is the case. So important to note. And I haven't left enough space, guys, purposely so that you can see what you do in this situation. Say, please refer to end of my booklet for continuation. And then I go to the end here and I say 1 continued. So they know I'm doing that same question, and I'll say directors can be held liable for breach of fiduciary duty if they breach Section 75 and 76 of the Companies Act. Paul breached both 75 and 76, and therefore he can be held liable. Don't need to go and explain the breach again. You've done that above, so you're now just concluding on his liability. Okay, back to the scenario. So I can come back and I can cross off Section 75, not disclosing, voting, and I can now cross off my Companies Act, director's conduct. Next, we'll look at our concerns with King. So I've got here, my chairperson is not an independent non-exec. There's no lead who's been appointed. I do not have a majority non-exec, although the majority of the non-exec are, however, independent. So let's go to King, Principle 7. Composition of your governing body, Principle 7. The governing body should comprise majority non-exec, most of whom should be independent. So I've got an issue there. Then I've got another issue here under there, independence and conflicts. All members should be required to declare any conflicts of interest. He has not, Paul. So there's an additional point we can add. And then, under your chair, governing body should have an independent non-executive member as the chair, and they should appoint a lead independent non-executive. So I can now go and discuss all of those non-compliance. So per King, the governing body should comprise majority non-executive directors, most of whom should be independent. The board comprises 3 executive to 1 non-exec. Therefore, majority are not non-executive. I can then state here, of the non-exec, all are independent, and therefore they have compliance. There. Okay. Per King, the chair of the governing body, and if you're saying board here, that's fine because this is a board of directors, should be independent, non-executive director. The chair is the marketing director, therefore not independent, non-executive. And then per King should be a lead independent, non-executive. Guys, that's because they need someone to be able to take the lead where the chairperson is compromised. So every governing body should have that. And there is no lead independent, non-executive. And per King, the directors should disclose any conflict of interest. Paul has not disclosed his interest in household bottles, therefore non-compliance. And now that I've picked up my issue with him, I can discuss his not acting in the best interest. And guys, that you'll find in Principle 1. So let's quickly go have a look. Principle 1, the governing body should lead ethically and effectively. All members must act in good faith in the best interest of the organization and avoid conflicts of interest. So now I can go and say, not acted in the best interest in good faith and have not avoided the conflict of interest. So per King, your directors or your members should act in the best interest of entity and I'll make a separate point, should avoid conflict of interest. Paul has not acted in the best interest of the company because he has not disclosed his interest in bottles or household and he has not avoided a conflict of interest because he has taken part in a decision where he has a conflict of interest. And then once again, I need more space because I need to discuss the non-compliance with laws because Paul has not complied with the Companies Act. So I'm going to say continue the end, and then after where I've continued here, I'm going to put down King, and I'm going to say per the King, directors should comply with your laws and regulations. Paul has not complied with the Companies Act in disclosing his interest. Therefore, non-compliance with King. And so I've addressed my concerns with the composition in terms of King. I have addressed non-compliance with laws and regulations and also directors' conduct from a King perspective as well as disclosures. Then we noted now the CPC, conflict of interest, because we had once again highlighted the CASA and then linked the decision being made to the CASA. However, if I was not able to make that connection, but I can see I'm dealing with minutes of a board meeting, there's no information here about auditors, so it must be the in-business part of the CPC that I need to be working with, but I'm not sure which section. My starting point, I'm going to open up part 2 of my contents for CASA in business, and I have a look at the different situations that are addressed in the CPC, and hopefully from that I'll be able to find my answers. So let's go to the CPC. So my starting point would be to come into part 2, which deals with professional accountants in business. I'm looking for the sections that are applicable, and as I'm scanning through I see, conflict of interest. Oh goodness, he had a conflict of interest. The CASA in business, Paul Pogba had the directorship in the 2 businesses. So I'm going to have to discuss from a conflict of interest perspective. I keep scanning through and then I get to responding to non-compliance with laws and regulations. So I'm going to look at both of those. Section 210. So section 210, conflict of interest, says you could have a self-interest threat to objectivity as a result of this. So where he's got two or more parties have interests in a matter that conflict, which is the specific case, and what needs to happen. In order to eliminate this threat, withdraw from the decision-making process, or a safeguard would be to restructure responsibilities or have an oversight role. So I'm going to say Paul Pogger is a director of both Sani-time and Household Bottles. Therefore, he has a conflict of interest. In fact, before I state this, I should prove that this is even applicable. So actually, before you, I'm going to say Paul Pogba is a chartered accountant in business. So I've proved he's a CASA, and therefore, obviously, this now becomes relevant. He's a director of both of these, therefore, there is a conflict of interest. So we have this creates a self-interest threat to objectivity. That's what it said in the standard. So I need to say, is it significant? And I would say that it is significant because he isn't disclosing, and therefore he's obviously trying to hide it, so that would make it significant. So safeguards would be to remove the threat, is to withdraw from the decision-making process. Okay, then, because he is a CASA in business, he has a responsibility where laws and regulations are being broken. So let's go and have a look at that section. So your section 260, responding to non-compliance with laws and regulations, is applicable because he is a CASA. The scary thing here is that he is the one who is non-complying. So ultimately, this is going to be irrelevant because he's not going to do it. But what we have is self-interest or intimidation threat to integrity and professional behavior if he's aware and does nothing about it. So what should happen? There's a whole bunch of information here, guys. We have highlighted the important part. So if he is aware, he needs to obtain an understanding of the matter. He needs to consider whether the matter has been appropriately addressed by senior personnel. And then he needs to consider the actions that need to be taken. Forming management, disclosing to the appropriate authorities, or resigning from the employing organization. So I'm going to say Paul should respond to the non-compliance with laws and regulations. He should obtain an understanding of the matter and discuss it with management. Consider if it has been addressed, and if not, consider reporting to the authorities and leaving the business. But like I say, in this instance, he is the person who's not complying, so he's not going to leave or report himself. I'm just trying to cover all my bases with every section that is relevant. Okay, let's look at question 1-2.